Former President Donald Trump could become the first former president in decades to be subpoenaed to testify before Congress. I'm Tyrone Bowman. This is Tyrone Bowman Tonight. The Trump subpoena, what to know. The January 6th committee seeks to compel testimony and documents from former president. I found an article on the online publications of the Wall Street Journal. Quote, the House Select Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol voted to issue a subpoena to former President Donald Trump, seeking to compel him to provide documents and testimony under oath. The panel voted 9-0 to issue the subpoena. He is the one person at the center of the story of what happened on January 6th, so we want to hear from him. Chairman Benny Thompson, a Democrat from Massachusetts, said, we also recognize that a subpoena to a former president is a serious and extraordinary action. That's why we want to take this step in full view of the American people, he said. The former president could comply with the subpoena and testify. He could appear before the committee and assert his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, a step he took recently in a New York probe of his financial dealings. Mr. Trump could go to court to contest the legitimacy of the subpoena, or he could refuse to testify, potentially setting up a high-stakes legal standoff. Legal experts said it was unlikely that Mr. Trump would cooperate, and he issued a statement criticizing the committee. Mr. Trump previously engaged in a lengthy legal battle with Congress over its efforts to subpoena his accountants and bankers for past financial records. A Supreme Court decision in the case landed in a middle ground that didn't embrace all of either side's arguments. Lawmakers eventually obtained some of the records they were seeking. What happens if Democrats lose control of the House in the midterm elections? Democrats currently have a narrow majority in the House, and nonpartisan analysis favor the GOP to win the majority. Republican leaders have said they would end the January 6th committee if they take control, and the panel has been working to wrap up its probe and write a final report. If Republicans are running the House, they would likely cancel the Trump subpoena, said Randall Ellison, a former federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. What are Congress's investigative powers? Congress has broad powers to conduct investigations in service of its legislation functions. When lawmakers want information from a source resisting disclosure, they can issue a subpoena demanding testimony of documents and have legal means. From civil proceedings to a criminal prosecution referral to enforce compliance. Who else has Congress subpoenaed related to the January 6th Capitol riot? The committee has subpoenaed other people in Mr. Trump's orbit to testify, and some have, including former White House counsel Pat Cipollone and former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson. Some of these appearances have been behind closed doors. The panel has referred 4 people to the Justice Department for failing to comply. The department chose to prosecute just 2 of them. Former Trump advisor Peter Navarro and strategist Steve Bannon, who were both indicted on charges of contempt of Congress. Mr. Navarro has pleaded not guilty. Mr. Bannon was convicted and is awaiting an October 21 sentencing. Prosecutors declined to charge 2 others, Mr. Trump's final chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and Dan Scavino, the deputy chief of staff for communications in the Trump White House. Unlike Messrs. Navarro and Bannon, both Mr. Meadows and Scavino engaged in some cooperation with the committee before cutting off talks. Mr. Meadows provided communications before ending his cooperation. The decision of whether to charge Mr. Trump if he fails to comply with the congressional subpoena would be similarly fraught. Has a former president ever been subpoenaed to testify before Congress? Yes. In 1846, Congressional Select Committees subpoenaed former presidents John Quincy Adams and John Tyler in connection with an investigation into Daniel Webster's disbursements from a covert contingent fund. During his time as Secretary of State, the former presidents complied, giving testimony or submitted a deposition. During the McCarthy era in 1953, former President Harry Truman refused to comply with a subpoena issued by the House Un-American Activities Committee. The committee was investigating Mr. Truman's nomination of U.S. government economist Harry Dexter White to a top International Monetary Fund post. Mr. White, who was by then deceased, had been accused of being a spy, which he had denied. I'm Tyrone Bowman. Never surrender. Never quit.